All right, folks, we have got a very special episode of the Summer Series lined up for you today. We are talking to an investor who did not let a difficult background stop them. They've gone from foster care to self-funding retirement. Ben, this is an amazing story.
It's an amazing story, Bryce. It's an episode around breakthroughs and being the change that you want to see in the world, Bryce. This is a ripper.
Oh, I love it, Ben. Folks, this is a ripper. Let's crack into the show now.
Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, co-host of Escape from the City on the ABC, and partner of Empower Wealth Advisory. Ben Kingsley, chair of Property Investors Council of Australia and the founder of Empower Wealth Advisory, named the 2018 and 2019 Property Advisory Firm of the Year. Stay tuned as they bring you the insider's guide to property, finance and money management.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Property Couch podcast. This is the summer series. We are talking about transforming stories, and today's story is an unbelievable story about a woman, Ben, who not only had money scarcity growing up, but had food scarcity as well. It is an incredible. I loved every moment of the conversation I had with Marianne.
Oh, me too. I mean, obviously I got the little backstory before we started and I'm like, wow. Be the change that you want to see in the world was my notes here. And she is doing that. This is a story of breakthrough.
Mm-hmm.
Your plot in life, where you start don't matter. Where you finish is what is important. And this is an unbelievable story about that. I cannot wait for our community to basically hear all about Marianne's story.
It is a great story. Now, before we get there, Ben, we are now sort of getting deeper into January, and people are downloading the More app and having some great stories.
Thousands of people have been downloading, and the feedback has been tremendous.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like two of the big things that they've been saying, right? They love the goal section. You know, the simplicity in the goal section is the power of it. It's so and the sequential order of it in terms of, and the fact you can play around with a few of those things. So people are going nuts in terms of putting short-term goals and little milestone goals, and other people are putting big goals, big rocks in there. So again, it's designed for however you want to use it. It's completely tailored to that story. But the other one that's also been really, really strong in the feedback is I can now do my monthly checkup on my Money Smarts on the go. Now, one of them said on the couch. So they're like, they can sit down and like, okay, they open their banking on their mobile. Now, me personally, I tend to like a bigger screen, but I'm loving the fact that it's like they open up their banking, they look through, nothing untoward in their primary account. Oh, wait a minute, that's a provisional spend. I'll just go and add that. Switch screens, go and add that I'm sitting on the couch, I'm watching a show, but I'm doing my checkup. It's like, that's the variation. You don't have to be at your desktop anymore. You can effectively do it anywhere on the go. And that has been one of the positive stories around the Money Smart system on the go.
Showing your age there, Fossil. You need to be on the big screen. Hey.
Well,
the young people today, mate, they're on their phones.
I like to bring up my monthly, sort of primary account, and then my credit card statements. I've got 3 screens, so I bring them up, and I have the Money Smarts on the front screen, and I work through and do my little reconciliation, and then I'm good. And
Good news is, mate, it works for dinosaurs like you, and it works for the younger people too.
Well, that's right. It's just a choice. Basically, it's a platform. You can access it anywhere you want to. But I love the fact that people, these modern, they just move through these apps far quicker than I do, mate, in terms of their phone. So
my kids school me in technology and how to move fast. But hey, Ben, before we cut to this interview that you and I recently had with our very special guest today, just got to say that our guest was very good to sneak us in between an appointment that she had. So she was talking to us in the car, and the internet was a little patchy. So just hang in there, folks. You can tell at certain times that she might be talking on a phone that has a little bit of a mixed signal, but the interview is incredible. So just push past that because it is a wonderful chat. So let's cut to the interview you and I had recently with Marianne. All right, Ben, we've got a very special guest today on this edition of the Summer Series. We are chatting with TPC listener Marianne. Welcome to the Property Couch, Marianne.
Hi guys, how are you?
We are very well. We're very excited to chat to you today, and there is a lot to unpack with your story. But I think we'll start from the beginning, as we always do, Marianne. Let's talk about conversations as a kid growing up over the dinner table. What were they like for you?
Yeah, so we didn't really have many conversations about money. It was very scarce. So even to the point of food being scarce. So yeah, quite a scarcity mindset growing up with that, which carried on till much later in life as well. But in some cases stood me in good stead.
Okay, so tell us a little bit more. What were the circumstances? You know, clearly that sounds like there was some adversity that needed to be overcome, but no conversations and, food scarcity. That's, can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, so I guess I've learned since growing up that that's pretty unusual in Australia to have food scarcity. But there was 3 of us kids. Our mum was a single mum and probably struggled in a lot of ways to the point where I guess the state decided for a few different reasons that we couldn't live with her anymore, and we became wards of the state, probably for many reasons. Yeah, so there was never very much money around, never very much food around. So that kind of really stuck with me for a long time.
Understandably so. I mean, obviously that is not the common upbringing that anyone has, Marianne. And so tell us a little bit about what that means as effectively becoming a foster child. What's the story there around? Were the 3 of you still kept together, or did you, were you moved around a lot? Just sort of paint a picture for us in terms of what that was like for you.
Yeah, so we were moved around a little bit, but then ultimately we were placed with my maternal grandmother, who did do her best, but it was tough. So at 14, I did leave and head out on my own, and I guess that's where my own money story started. And because of the scarcity mindset, I was very keen to not go back into that scarcity. So I started off with envelopes in my budgeting journey,
Yeah, good on you.
which I've now read is not a bad way to go. And just I think as you guys talk about quite a lot, having that visibility. So the envelopes gave me that visibility about where my money needed to be, and if I was overspending in one thing, where I was actually taking it from, which is really, really important. So that was where I started and where I kind of stayed for a really long time. I was really afraid of debt and didn't really have any idea around good debt or any education around there. So it was always about staying out of debt and just saving into a savings account, and always around making sure I had a surplus, not only for myself, but if my younger brother and sister ever needed any help. So making sure I had that surplus sitting there in the bank account. And as we all got older, I realized that surplus needed to be more, because the older you get, the bigger trouble you can get into financially, and that kind of thing. But yeah, things were pretty good. I never did get back into that scarcity, which has always been really good. Yeah.
Now we're going to get to obviously the full story here. If it's okay with you, can I get a little bit more context around those earlier years for you? So one of 3 children. Were you the oldest? How old were your other siblings?
Yeah, I was the eldest, and the 2 others were 4 years apart each. So 4 years younger than me, and then 8 years younger than me for the youngest. So
because where I'm trying to lean into here, because I know this is obviously, it's a difficult story. I'm leaning into the scarcity story there. Like, when did you realize that you lived in a world of scarcity and effectively limitation? Like, how old were you when you came to that realization?
I guess pretty young, like probably around 6 or 7, when I was making meals and there wasn't enough food to feed both my younger brother and myself. So I'd divide up the food between the 2 of us, and then realize that he was still going to be hungry, or give him more. And
Wow.
what have you. There just wasn't enough to go around. Yeah.
And so what were your coping mechanisms? I'm really keen because that can go one of two ways, can't it? Right. There's this ability to forge ahead and just, keep going, or there's this ability to resign and sort of give up. Where did you sit in sort of that? I mean, was it just survival instincts that sort of just kept you going?
Yeah, I think in the really early days, it was very much survival. Yeah. So we didn't go to school very often, but when we did go to school, then there was lots of different ways to get some food. Often teachers would realise and provide, which was amazing. Yeah.
Wow.
So that was, there was definitely probably a little bit of theft in there. Yep. So if we came across money, we would take it. Yep.
Yeah, well, that's a survival instinct, right?
Survival
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Marianne, so there's a story about 14 going on your own. There's a story about having to go to your maternal grandmother. If you weren't having conversations about money with your grandmother, what were the observations of how she was managing money? Is that where you learned the envelope system? And if not, where did you pick that up? Because at the end of the day, that envelope system has provided you with an incredible foundation that we wish a lot more people had. So, every cloud has a silver lining. There's some real positivity there for you. But what was those observations of grandmother's money management?
So that was also probably not amazing, but how amazing can it be with 3 kids and not much money? So I think the envelope system, I don't really know where exactly that came from, because I think where it came from is I had started with a written budget and learning much later in life, like halfway through university, that I'm dyslexic. So the writing just wasn't doing it for me. So I needed a visual. I really needed that physical visual aspect of it. Yeah. So I think I just came up because I wasn't managing the money. It was all, if it was sitting all in my bank account at once, it was just not defined. So every payday, I ended up taking it all out and physically putting it in envelopes so that I could see and understand. So I think I came up with that on my own, which I'm thinking back, I am really lucky to have done, actually, because I wasn't managing it, and I just thought, well, this just can't go on because I just don't know where anything's going. I couldn't handle the non-visibility of it. Yeah,
because you made the comment too that it's in the envelope system. That's how and you've given some clarity around that. But you said you also knew if you were overspending on this envelope, which envelope it was coming from. So it gave you that real understanding of, okay, spending here has sacrifices over there, and
exactly right.
Probably helped to sharpen you up. Your story is an incredible story, so we should set the scene for all of our listeners that this, when we work through this story, there's an incredible amount of resilience and success that you've shown. So in those early days, fearful of debt, trying to find your way, trying to hack around dyslexia, all those sorts of things. How would you have described your financial literacy levels, and what did you do as part of your skill set to increase that?
Oh, look, to be honest, it stayed at that basic level for a really long time. So I got there really early with the envelope system. But to be honest, it then stayed there for like a good 20 years, I think. It definitely set me up quite well. That fearfulness of debt made sure that I actually paid off my uni degree as I went. And back then you could get 20% off if you paid up front, which is great. So I have no HECS debt. It also set me up because I went into healthcare and I burned out. So because I didn't have a mortgage when I probably should have, but that meant that I could start from the bottom and do minimum wage jobs and start again. Whereas I probably wouldn't have had that bravery with a mortgage. So there's definitely the silver linings of having stayed there. But things really turned around actually only probably about 10 years ago when I realised things needed to change and there was a lot that I didn't know. And that's when I started reading a lot and listening to a lot of podcasts like you guys and investment podcasts and and all of that kind of thing, and just really educating myself on it. And that's where, things have really turned around. And just actually, I think I came to the realization probably about 10 years ago or a little bit more that actually I really did need to care about my financial health and education, whereas previously it was just like, well, if I've got enough money to live and not be in debt, then that's fine. Whereas I just, came to that realization that I really needed to change some things.
What was the spark? What 10 years ago, what triggered that transformation in mindset?
I think I realized how much I, as a really independent person, I was not going to be okay with having none of my own money on maternity leave.
Here we go. There's the motivation there. I want to come back for that because I think there's a good element of a conversation we can have there. Envelope systems, we refer to them as jar systems. I want to double click on that story because it's almost, for most people, a rite of passage that you need to separate out all of your money into different buckets or jars or envelopes. So my first question to you, Mary-Ann, is how many envelopes?
I had a lot of envelopes. I probably had about 15. And, I've still got 15 as offset accounts. I still work that way.
That's what I was referring to about a rite of passage. That is normally what most people need to do to feel in control of their money. All right. As you mature in that process and you develop more skill, usually you can synthesize that down into less requirements. Hence that, where the money smarts is for most people. But it is, I think it is an important message for our community here is that if you are doing a detailed system and you're running more detailed, sort of arrangements, it's going to take a little bit more time for you, but you can potentially synthesize it down into, less of those things. But coming back to your point, you're obviously still running the multiple virtual jars or virtual envelopes now with your offset account. So you've got up to 15 of those. So tell us a little bit about how that works for you in terms of why so many and, what sort of some of the typical, categories are we talking about?
Yeah. So I guess the main ones are always the set outgoings. So your mortgage, your car expenses. Like I really learnt very early that I disliked having my my living experience curtailed by big bills that came in. Like when I was, as an older teenager and early 20s, friends would always be like, oh, the rego's come in and the insurance is all due at the same time and I just can't go anywhere or do anything and I've got no money for weeks at a time. And that would just be like, there's no way I could handle that. So it was, So it was always about, so how much is rego going to be over the years? So then break that down. What do I need to put away every pay to make that not be an issue and not impact on my lifestyle at the time when the bill comes in? So I used to have, I guess, separate things for service, separate envelopes for services, for the insurance, for the rego, whereas now that's all one car expense, right? So it's just what's that expense going to be for the year? And I even make sure that I've got like one set of tyres factored in there for the year and one set of excess in case I have an accident and have to pay the excess. Because the last thing you want when you have a car accident is to be worried about money.
Yes, absolutely.
So that kind of thing.
The wonderful part about this story is the challenging environment that you started out in the world has provided an incredible platform for you to lay very strong money foundations, and I think that's first important takeaway here. You talked about the call for you 10 years ago was around maternity leave and not wanting to have no money. And you've, in the lead up to this conversation, you spoke about the fact that you've worked really hard on your financial literacy. So can you sort of lean in on that a little bit and tell us a little bit about how that call, what that spark looked like, how you converted that spark into actual action, and then what the financial literacy journey has looked like from that point?
Yeah, I think because of the scarcity mindset and being really afraid of getting into debt and not having really seen the mechanics of buying property or doing anything like that, I just was really hesitant to ever do it on my own. And for one reason or another, I haven't seen anybody do it in my family. Don't really have anyone to call on to help me with that. And I was just like, I just got to the point where I was like, well, I know you don't want to do it on your own, but you just got to get in there and you got to do it now. Off you go.
Yeah.
Everything else has been, so you got to do this too. Go learn it. I know it's scary. It's a lot of money. A house is a lot of money. That's a lot of debt. You've been staying away from debt your whole life.
You say that with good humour.
So that was, yeah.
You say that with good humour and as a throwaway line, but that is a big deal, right? And a lot of people get exposed to forks in the road where they can make a change. And some people take the road less travelled and some people don't. And you did take the road less travelled and you pushed yourself and you leaned into something that was uncomfortable and you took action and all those sorts of things. So have you reflected on the fact that, you know, some of these decisions you've made are uncommon and the stretching that you've been doing, that is actually uncommon?
Yeah, I feel pretty lucky. I was born with a personality that's led me to have a really big, exciting life. And this is also one of those decisions. So I feel really lucky that I was blessed with a personality and a drive for things like that, and just the personal resources to do it. Because I think I'd be a really lazy person if it was personal choice, but I'm just born with this drive. What do you do with it? Well, you just make the best of it and you go forward, I think. So yeah, like I have reflected on it, but I feel really incredibly blessed and lucky.
So Marianne, at the age of 14, you go out on your own. Now
Yep.
That's obviously you're still a legal minor. Where I'm sort of leaning into this conversation is we heard indications that you've done university, so education was really important to you as well. And I think for most people, you have also learnt that education gave you the knowledge, that gave you the opportunity to work, and it gave you the opportunity to work in the field of expertise, and you've developed that up, and now you've got a career in that space and you're on a six-figure income in that area. So that's the pathway there. And in listening to you talk with Bryce just a moment ago, I made that connection that, again, if it is to be, it's up to me. But you lent on that knowledge and education piece to then say, well, my financial literacy is low and now I'm going to do something about it. So you embarked on this education journey to build knowledge, and then knowledge gives you confidence to take action. So my question to you is, at what age did you recognize that education is everything?
Luckily, education in my family has always been classed as important, which is great. But also because of the upbringing, school was like a reprieve from the home life. So it was important for me to go to school. And then when I did leave at 14, I was almost 15, it was kind of assumed that I would then never finish school, which then obviously I lent into and was going to prove everybody wrong.
Yeah, okay.
Obviously.
So to prove everyone motivation, yeah, I got a bit of that in me.
Yeah. But to be fair, I was probably going to do that anyway, because it was important, and I knew it was important. But then looking back now, knowing that I was dyslexic, once I got through VCE, I was down in Melbourne, I didn't want to read street signs. Like that was it for me for a couple of years. So it took me a few years for my brain to want to learn anything again. But luckily by that time I'd gone overseas for the first time and hit London, and London was just amazing. I mean, it doesn't matter who you are, you'll find your people in London. There's just so many people. And it was actually, I was working as a living carer, and there was a wonderful family that I was working for. And the daughter of the man that I was looking after just said, "You are too smart, Marianne, to do this for the rest of your life. You need to go to university. You need to go." So So off I went.
What
Brilliant.
did you study? What did you study?
Oh, psychology, of course.
Of course.
Of course.
Of
Yeah.
course.
So, okay. So there's a real value placed on education. It was a real way for you to change the path for you. There is a property story amongst this. There is an embracing of debt story amongst this. So let's start to share what that looks like. I think it started just before COVID for you.
Yeah, it did. I was actually really, really lucky. I thought, well, I'll do the first home builder. I'd had like almost a house deposit for 20 years and just not been willing to take the leap. Between coming back from London and being burnt out and trying to change careers, I obviously couldn't use that deposit for a little while until I was back earning a decent salary. So as soon as I was back earning a decent salary, which took probably about 5 years with the change in careers, and then I was just like, okay, let's do this. And I just really embraced it and just researched. I'm like, okay, what do I need to do? And luckily, I've got a lot of friends that have been really open about sharing what wage they're on, what their houses, how they, what they did, where they bought, this kind of thing, what things were important. Also, luckily, one of the places where I ended up during the career change was in retail leasing, which taught me heaps about property. So that was great. And negotiation skills. So retail leasing, apparently I had a knack for negotiation, which has come in really handy. And then so I started looking and I came across a new development. And I know there's a lot of things to be said about new developments that are maybe not the best. But for me, looking at it and weighing things up, I was going to get the first homeowners grant, go with that. And then also I was lucky enough that it was the end of the development. So I ended up talking to the sales manager instead of a salesperson, which meant I didn't end up paying commission, which was amazing. So the deal did end up being quite good. And researching what made a good, so this was going to be the first homeowners grant, but I was always looking at it as an investment property, especially because it was, it's a kit home in a development build. So I was looking at what was going to make it continually rentable and resellable. So I decided that the things that were important were close to transport, on the eastern side of the motorway up here in Queensland, because you just can't release more land. You can't make more land between a motorway and the seaboard. So although it was in a development area, so there's not the scarcity there, there kind of is a little bit. And it was 3-minute drive away from a new Greenfields Westfield that was being done. There's a TAFE there, there's a train station. So I took the leap. And then COVID came along just before I'd signed the contracts and everything was done, which then gave me the first home loan deposit scheme, which was amazing, and the federal first homeowners grant. And I was just like, oh my goodness, this almost makes up for me not doing anything for 20 years. Yeah, almost, not quite, but almost. It's like, this is phenomenal. And because it was right at the start, there was none of this building supply issue. So they built it in 5 months. It was that's unheard of now.
This property game's easy. I mean, you get your time at just before COVID. Everyone thinks the property prices are going to collapse. Instead, they go up by 25 to 40%, depending on the area that you're in. And here we go. But this whole game's easy. Let's just rinse and repeat. I was just so lucky. I can't believe it. Looking back, I was really, really lucky, and just the timing of it. But I think one of the things with luck is that you need to be prepared. If you're not prepared, when that lucky circumstance comes along, then you can't take advantage of it. And I just happened to be really, really prepared at the time that came along. So, yeah.
Luck equals opportunity meeting preparation anyway. So I think that's your
exactly right.
Living, breathing definition of that. So there's a couple of things. Housing estates for us, you'll hear us talk about that on this podcast. It's different when you're trying to live there, put a roof over your head, create shelter, take advantage of all those opportunities that you did to get on the property ladder. So let's be super clear for everyone in this community, the differentiation between basic needs, roof over the head, foot on the ladder, versus having lots of choice and going, will I choose this or will I choose that? That's the differentiation point here. That's one. Number two, how did that feel? For those people at home, you can't see, we're watching a video here across Zoom. Your face lit up. You had a big, great, huge smile when you're telling that story, which is great. But that also meant you had to get into some debt, which you had a scarcity mindset and a fear of debt that you were overcoming. So can you talk us through your mindset around that first mortgage, signing the mortgage papers, and what that felt like early days?
Yeah, look, I won't lie, it was really scary, but I had done a lot of work in the 5 years leading up to that. I had done a lot of work on that mindset of the debt to get there, and what that looked like, and getting away from that mindset and getting away from that fear. The education really helped with that. Like, just being educated about the debt and just realizing that, you know what, if I actually can't afford the mortgage of a 4-bedroom house, which is what it was for a first home, which is phenomenal, then I can go back to renting a room somewhere and rent the house out and still be able to make the mortgage. Like, I just realized that there were those options there. So the education, which as usual is what really helps with any fear like that. Just, having that, making visible the unknown, right, it's so important. But yeah, it felt so there. By the time I was signing mortgage papers, it felt really big, and it did feel a bit scary, but nowhere near as scary as what it had previously, which was amazing. So it did more feel great, which was awesome. And to have done it, actually, when we were talking earlier, it's like, well, I didn't want to do it all alone. I didn't want to do it by myself without any help. But then once you've done it and you get there, you're just like, oh, and I did it on my own. That's amazing.
It is amazing, Marianne. And I think, this is a story of breakthrough. And I know through probably some of the psych work that you would have done on yourself, there's a lot of people who are challenged by this idea that this is their plot in life, and, this is how the cards were dealt for them. But you haven't been that person, and you've moved from that scarcity piece and a lot of the other challenges. Am I worthy or deserving of this? But I think if people play with that type of mindset, then ultimately, they're gonna always be hard on themselves. So you want to move away from that idea of deserving, and just basically make this whole concept around taking action, and your rewards will come for your effort and your hard work. And you're a testimony to that in terms of what that looks like. So for me, the next part of that question is perfect timing on the property. It's increased in value significantly for you. And now, what does that mean for you in terms of you've got equity in that property, and it's opening up a whole new world of opportunity? So you've got over that big hurdle that most people can't get over. It's like, oh, this is my plot in life. This is where I sit. You've been able to smash through that barrier, break through that, not even being judged around deserving or non-deserving. So you push through that barrier, and here you are now, equity, opportunity, potential, unlimited, for a single woman, and you're about to, build out financial peace for yourself. So tell us what that looks like for you in terms of next steps.
Yeah, so the next steps I've already actually taken, and again, perhaps not. I am second guessing myself now because I still am not putting that big rock in the jar. I've still not got the family home. And so I do now have to strategize around that. And that's the next step that I'm thinking of. So what I did next, and what I'm in the process of doing, is building another investment one. So I actually put the deposit down on a piece of land a year ago, and it's taken a year for that land to register because of all the rains that we had, which I'm sure you'll be, really familiar with. And so then I actually had to make that decision only about a month ago, whether to go ahead, because I'd only put $1,000 down. I could still, just walk away free and clear from that. But by that time, there's about 50K equity in the land, which is hard to walk away from. And this was also a deal where I'd been talking to the sales manager. So again, not much commission or no commission. So the build price did go up by about 50K over that year, which then evens out with the equity. But it's a dual occupancy, a 1-bedroom and a 4-bedroom, which is great for the positive gearing of a property portfolio and to keep your lending opportunities there for the next one. So I decided ultimately not to walk away from it. And time will tell whether that was really the best decision, with wanting to get that big rock in the jar still and fit that in. But that's what I'm doing now. So that's only just starting to be built and should be built hopefully in the next 6 to 9 months. And the equity in that first property actually allowed that to be done completely on paper, totally on paper, no money down, which is fantastic. So it hasn't impacted my living or my savings. So I actually still have the saving for that other deposit there for the next one, and hopefully use the equity. However, the way that I did end up having to do it was I did have to cross-collateralize, which I didn't want to, but it was the lesser of about 3 evils. So there was a few things I didn't want to do. I didn't want to use any cash. I didn't want to use lender's mortgage insurance, and I didn't want to cross-collateralize. So it just ended up that either I was going to have to use all of my cash and not have any buffer, as well as use lender's mortgage insurance, or I was going to have to refinance, and I didn't want to refinance because I've got the current one locked in at under 2% for 4 years. So I didn't want to refinance, so I have cross-collateralized. That's the decision that I made. And again, time will tell. I know it's going to take some getting out of with that, but we'll see.
That's interesting that I mean, I don't know the nuance of the deal, right? So, but technically, why couldn't we have done a split of the equity release without touching the existing mortgage on the first property, which would have released the 25% that you would have needed to be an on-paper deal, and then get an 80% lend against the build and construction and land? That does seem a little odd.
So that is what I wanted to do initially. And I did feel a little bit like just this person that was just going in like at every angle. What angle could I actually just get this deal done? Because what I also learned from my first one was, at the end of the day, it didn't matter if I got, not the lowest interest or not the totally best deal on the home loan. You've got to go with what's going to get the deal done to get your foot on the ladder. And so that's what I used here. And so what happened was, because I had used the first home loan deposit scheme on the first house, to take any money out to use as an investment, they wanted me to refinance to get that first home loan deposit scheme, like getting our guarantor off the loan.
Right. Okay.
So it was a little bit more complicated.
No.
Yeah.
So that now makes sense to me in terms of it breaches the arrangement that's in place, that is the conditions of that particular loan. And so ultimately, we can still put that security as a second mortgage product on the new build. And so it protects the other lender. Now, I'm assuming did you go with the same lender or a different lender for property 2?
Yeah, so I had at first not wanted to go with the same lender because my education has told me that that's what gives you the most leverage, is spreading it out.
Yeah.
But because of the cross-collateralization, I did end up going with the same lender. But on the other hand, that does mean that I've got that loan with one of the top 4 banks.
Yep.
So it's still that, not triage is not the right word, but, that ladder of lending that you've got there.
Yeah. And I think, for the community's benefit there, it's very common that obviously if you're cross-collateralizing, the interest of other banks to go second mortgagee against another bank is not an appetite that they would normally hold dear to their hearts, and they would normally reject that. So when you are cross-collateralizing, you're often going to find yourself in the same lending camp for all the lending that you do.
Property investing is a game of finance as much as it's a game of bricks and mortar too, Marianne. So it's kind of, ideally you'd love to not cross-collateralize, but it also meant that you could take action. And so where cross-collateralization becomes a problem is when a bank gives you glass ceilings that they won't let you go through, when ordinarily, if your portfolio borrowing strategy had been structured in a different way, you could play banks off against each other to get it right. So that's not the case here for you. So no. I think it's a good learning point for our community that the preference is to not be cross-collateralized, but our preference is not to have mortgage insurance either. But if we do need mortgage insurance, we embrace it. So I think there's an important lesson in your story that people can learn from there. That if you've got the choice to not cross collateralize, and you do, you're mad. But if you don't have the choice, well, then you have a scenario where you're still taking action, like what you've described, which is good. So,
well said.
All right. So you're a success story on the property ladder, but this is not. You haven't gone all your eggs in the property basket story. Can you tell us a little bit about the breadth of your investing activities?
Yeah, so I'm still very new. I only started learning about shares and investing literally this year. Once I decided, what I was doing with the property, I was like, okay, you've got some extra brain space now. What are you going to learn next? So that was what was next. And I'm just so thankful to the age that we live in, that not only are there podcasts like yours, but there's ones on investing. So a lot of the ones that I listen to, I think, is the Equity Mates I started with, which was fantastic. And then not only having the information available, but also the technology has completely changed the game there. So having the brokerage accounts with really, really low brokerage that's all online allows people to get in with a lot less money, and to really be able to play around with a lot less risk, to learn with less risk, I guess, which is fantastic. So then also learning about that, I was just like, oh, why did I not start this 20 years ago? This is ridiculous. But then as I had conversations with my younger brother, actually, he's got 3 little boys. And I'm like, well, your oldest is 10. That's when Warren Buffett started. For their 10th birthdays, I'm opening them up a brokerage account. That's what they're getting. Because, even if I've come to it a little bit too late, it's never too late, right?
No.
But the learning is not just for yourself, right? It's so that we can pass it on to the next generation, and that generation is not starting at the beginning point. We all grow on the shoulders of the ones that came before us. So that's really important.
It should be easier. It should be easier. Like that's why with your kids, you think they should have it easy because they get the benefit of what you've learned, and then they can apply that. I'd like to reflect on your comment. You go, why shouldn't I have done this 20 years ago? We all had a laugh, and we've heard that many times, but we should really sort of, to borrow Ben's term, double click on that, because the reason a lot of people didn't do it 20 years ago is because if you go back then, there was probably some interest rate uncertainty that probably just gone through some form of X factor event that meant that the emotions that we're experiencing right now this summer in the shadows of the first interest rate rises that we've had for a little while, and some of the gains being given back and all those sorts of things, they're the moments that people need to make a decision so that in 20 years' time, they don't go, geez, why didn't I do this 20 years ago? They go, well, there's going to be a whole bunch of uncertainty and volatility and change. And if it was easy, everyone would do it, all that sort of stuff. And I think it's worth reflecting on. And I think it's worth sort of emphasizing that you've made the decisions. You're learning the share market. You're putting money away. And if you have a long enough time horizon, which you do, talking decades, not years, that is going to bear some incredible fruit for you and change the pathway for your life. You, in the notes leading up to this, gave us a little clue that podcast, financial literacy, learning, a story of really great success, but you also have conversations with your peer group. You've got friends that you connect with. Can you talk about that, how that works, and what that looks like as a support system for you?
Yeah, so I'm incredibly lucky to have some really great friends that are able to be really open about things, which can be rare. But I feel like with conversations like we're having today, it's becoming less rare, and people are realizing the importance of it. So there's a few that I've got, but one in particular, which I think for at least the last probably 5 to 8 years, my girlfriend and I, she lives in Sydney, and I've lived in Queensland for the last 10. So since we've been doing this, we've been states apart, and we've talked on the phone probably anywhere between once a week to 5 times a week, depending on what our job looked like, depending on what our life looked like, depending on what our commute looked like. So it's always in the mornings before work, and we just talk about everything. And as 2 women, changing careers, being in the corporate world, that kind of thing. So talking a lot about negotiations, how to negotiate with bosses, how to negotiate with bullying at work. how to negotiate pay remuneration with a new job or pay rises, all of that kind of thing. So we both bring different things to the party, different readings, different TED Talks, but also just motivation for each other and confidence. Like, no, you need to ask. You need to ask for this. You have all these reasons for it. You put it all on the table. You know your worth, and you at least ask for it. So just, that kind of thing. Don't ask, don't get, and just the confidence. Because I think in general, a lot of women don't ask for their worth, or they're afraid of asking for more. So that's been really instrumental, I think, for both of us. Yeah, just talking through all the things in our lives. And I think as humans, most of us understand things through verbalizing and bouncing off of each other. And I think often you can find the answer yourself just by talking things through, which is really important. So that's been really instrumental for me. Absolutely.
Marianne, you were really nervous about coming on to the podcast. And when I put the call out to come on, something stirred inside of you. What was it that got you to push past the nerves and to actually decide to come on and share your story?
Yeah, well, I think it was, I'd come across a couple of memes this year that the short of it is that this guy being asked questions like, why don't you have a house, or why don't you have this? And he's like, oh, well, I guess mum never talked about it. Or, dad's business. Mum, how much do you earn? Oh, we don't talk about that. We have this real culture in Australia of not talking about finances. If you don't talk about things, how are you going to learn? How does that happen? What does that look like? And I don't think that culture helps anybody. So when you put the call out that you said, especially that you said that you hadn't had a lot of women or females on there, and I just thought, well, if you really don't like this culture, then you've got to be the change that you want to see in the world. So off you go, get up there and get it done.
And we are grateful that you did. Thank you for putting your hand up. Everyone listening to this appreciates that you stepped up. So thank you.
Marianne, your story is an empowering story, not only for women, but for anyone who has, basically faced adversity and overcome that. You certainly are miles away from playing the victim story here. You've been given some challenges as a young age. I'm going to give you the floor now in terms of, obviously, thank you very much for coming on and sharing your story. But what are some of the messages or key messages that you want to share with the community in terms of, for them to take action? What are some of the things that you want to pass on to them?
Yeah, I think just really there's so much information out there. There's a wealth of information out there. You do have to be educated about what information you take on board. Go to multiple sources, but just get in there and start reading and start listening and digging and talking about it. Because if you're listening to some of the wrong information, the more people that you talk to about it, the more you'll know whether it's the wrong information or the right information. And it may not even be that it's the wrong information in general. It might just be wrong for you. And the more you talk about that, the more you'll understand whether that's the case, I think. But you just got to get in there and do things, make those decisions. Yeah.
Sage advice.
Marianne, you're an inspiration. I've been so excited to have this conversation with you today. My final question is around we're all on this journey, right? And it's a journey of achievement and it's a journey of fulfillment, right? So what is it that you would, you've set your compass, your roadmap's heading forward. Where are you headed? What does that look like for you? What is the money outcome for you? And the second, or the part B of that, what about the journey in your heart around the fact that you started with being afraid of debt, scarcity mindset, having food scarcity, being fortunate that your grandmother was able to step in at a crucial time? What will it mean like in your heart to go, well, as you reflect back and look at the pathway that you've embarked on, and let's fast forward maybe 10 or 15 years from now?
Yeah, so it's maybe a little bit more than that, but eventually I'm a little bit of a hippie at heart. So what that looks like is eventually having a nice big property with a couple of different dwellings on it, that if there's any family that ever needs to come and stay and live, they can, but also we can rent it out and go traveling. I've got a beautiful partner now, so the third property will be with him, hopefully, and changing his money story as well. So just looking at that and just continuing to have a really big, exciting life. And I think that money scarcity will always be with me underlying things, but paired with education makes for a really great future. So yeah, I think in the end, it's all come together to stand me in some really good stead.
It's a beautiful message there, Marianne, and one that makes me reflect on, we talk about the 7 grades of financial well-being, and we just got a clue about contribution there from you. And paying it forward, that, obviously there were people when you're a foster child who, were able to take care of you in that time. Hopefully they were, on the whole, good experiences, and for you to not lose sight of that and to potentially, pay that contribution forward. And even in the notes that you have here, you talk about privilege about being born in Australia. You've had a tougher start to life. But you still made good. So, we are forever humbled by your story in terms of sharing that with the community. So thanks very much for coming on the Property Couch.
No, thank you so much for the opportunity, and thank you so much for the podcast. It has been really great. I did go back when I first came across you. I went back and listened to the first 20. It was really important. You were right. Go back and listen to the first 20, and that's what I did, and it was really good.
Here. Thanks, Marianne.
Thanks so much.
Wow. Ben, the envelope system, food and money scarcity, dyslexic, afraid
Left
of
home
debt.
at 14, was a ward of the state. Ultimately in foster care. Oh, Marianne, you're an inspiration.
You are an incredible woman.
This is what I was saying about, before we cut to the interview. Where you start compared to where you finish is really just a matter of where you want to take yourself. And now she talked about she was blessed with obviously having a good brain, as she refers to it, but she is exercising that good brain. She is, exercising that muscle. She's educating herself. She's liaising with her girlfriend about, ideas that she's got around sort of doing that. She's been able to secure herself a really good professional job. I mean, really, the world's Marianne's oyster in the way in which she's going about it. And so I'm, what an inspirational story. If you don't get motivation out of that, if she didn't play the victim, she didn't, her situation was certainly a lot more severe than probably even she let on in the show. And so from that point of view, it's again, if it is to be, it's up to me. And now she's really out the other side, and she's got some exciting decisions to make about building out her future. And I just can't wait to see the decisions that she makes and the plans that she puts in place.
Marianne, you're a legend. I loved every moment of that. I will never get sick of having conversations with humans like you. So thank you for coming on to the show and just showing another backstory that some people will be able to relate to, and others will go, wow, what adversity have you overcome? And you're a credit to yourself. And thanks again for sharing your story on the Property Couch in what is the second last of the summer series here, Ben. The second last. So it's coming to an end. Incredible summer for you and me, but it's all good things have got to come to an end sometimes, Ben. So as my dad would say. Actually, if I think about that, that's probably not overly optimistic, is it? But anyway, mate, until next week.
Bryce, no excuses. Take action. Your future self will thank you for it.
There you go. Heard it here first, folks. We'll see you next week. Hey guys, Bryce here again. Just want to catch you before you go and let you know, if you're new to our community, there are a lot of episodes to catch up on, but it's really important that you start from the very beginning at episode number 1, because episode 1 through to 20 share all of the foundational pillars and frameworks that you need to know to get the best out of listening to this podcast. So I'd recommend that you start there, and the little tip is to maybe start on 1.5 speed. Now, for those of you that are time poor and don't have time to go back from the beginning, don't worry, we've got you covered as well, because we've created a binge guide that goes through all of the details and makes it easy for you to read and get up to speed very, very quickly. So if you go to thepropertycouch.com.au/fast track, you will be able to download that binge guide and you will be up to speed in no time. And whilst you're there, I've got a few extra goodies for you, because we have our top 5 frameworks that you'll learn on this podcast, as well as the Make Money Simple Again ebook, which will help you with the foundations of basic money management, so you'll have everything you need to succeed in building your own lifestyle design and getting the best out of this podcast. Now, just a reminder that anything that we cover on this podcast is not considered financial advice. We certainly recommend that you get your unique circumstances looked at by your individual advisor, and everything we talk about is just general in nature. But folks, I want to encourage you again to go to thepropertycouch.com.au/fast track, and you can go and get all those goodies and catch up right away.